Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to our first edition of Fire Up Michigan. Yes, Fire Up Michigan. We are in the Michigan area, the Mitten State. And am I wearing an M hat? You better believe I am. I have the Michigan Wolverines, but there's a lot in Michigan to go out there and untap, as you are going to find out tonight. A new era has launched. No, it isn't a show based out of Metro Detroit. It's for the entire state of Michigan. So I want to make sure I get that out there right away. During the course of this show here, there are times we could be talking about the Wolverines, Tigers, Michigan State Spartans, University of Detroit, Mercy, whatever comes to mind, whatever the flavor of the day. It could even be auto racing for all you know. But we are wide open, and I am pleased to be joined, well, by my longtime colleague, George Eichorn. George, we're back.
We're back. Good to see you again. Good to be on, Scott.
And Mark, Man Mancini, my brother from another mother. Mark, you ready to light it up in Detroit?
Yeah, I'm ready to light Motown up, man. Let's tip over cars. Let's get a little celebration, whether it's the Tigers, the Lions, the Pistons, the Wings, Wolverines, whatever you want to talk about. Spartans, where do you want to go?
Well, this is my dream team. But before I go into a lot of that, I do want to point out, okay, that George Eichorn and I have such a history where I began my first opportunity at ABC Radio, WXYZ, doing sports talk with Ron Cameron. George went in there as basically a guest of a guy by the name of Sam Greenblatt. And as it turns out, George liked me enough, said, no, you're not going to come in here one time. I need to bring you in more often. And immediately what ended up happening is he brought me on as a producer, and I'll never forget the time working for the Detroit Monitor that I wrote a story, "Don't Boycott the Olympics." And George said, "I disagree with you." I said, "I don't care if you disagree, get it published." He did. And I'll never forget the time that my creative writing teacher, God rest her soul, Miss Ann Nozeski, asked everybody to get everything published. I walked in there with this paper and shoved it right on her desk, got it published. She was nuts. She didn't agree with the subject matter, but don't boycott the Olympics. I got it up there. I proved my point, and I scored a few points with her. Never got an A, but I guess a B worked out just as well with her. But
yeah, George, Scott, we had a lot of great memories together, and you're right. We got our start over at WXYZ, ABC owned and operated radio station. Really, the forerunner of the sports talk show format. Dave Dials did it there, and then a guy named Ron Cameron, as you said, came along. After that, we had a lot of other guys that stepped into that studio. Dick Vitale, folks, got his start, man, on WXYZ when Scott and I were working there. Dick Vitale, as a broadcaster, got his start after he was fired by the Pistons.
Yeah, we used to work with Dickie V, and I saw Dickie V. He's out in Bradenton, Sarasota area. When I saw him, he always remembers me by name. Once upon a time, he got to start. So, Man, you're dealing with some history here, buddy.
I'll tell you, geez, we're gonna a lot of history in Motown. Even that 35-5 start by the Tigers, Desmond Howard with the Michigan Panthers.
Right.
Man, oh man.
I tell you, man, there are a lot of great memories, and you're going to help us stoke those fires and create that discussion on this show. We're going to have a lot of fun, aren't we?
Oh man, I'll tell you, blessed to do with some pros here, man, professionals.
All right, well, you know what? There's no better place to start than with Miguel Cabrera. And let me tell you a little something about Miguel Cabrera, which really intrigues me about everything that's going on. Once upon a time, I used to cover the Lions all the time. And, you know, one of the things I really enjoyed about going to the Lions games besides everything was I used to look at their press releases, and every time Barry Sanders used to step on the field, he was always passing somebody. Who will he pass next? Well, you know, just so you know, folks, in a 3-2 loss to Houston Thursday night, Miguel Cabrera had 3 singles to move past Al Kaline for 31st on the all-time hits list at 3,008. He's a member of the 3,500 home run club, 3,000 hits, 500 home run club. And here's an interesting thing about George Eichorn. George had a chance to see that milestone, but the problem was the thing got rained out. So you talk about, but, you know, Mr. Tiger, you know, everybody knows about Al Kaline, and of course we know that Mike Ilitch paid Miguel Cabrera real well. So I think they paid him well that they had to endure his injuries situation. Otherwise, he would have had this milestone a lot sooner. So, all right, George, why don't you go ahead and let the audience know what it was like to go to a game that wasn't a game, that the milestone that got away, as they would say.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That was the Friday night game a week ago, and the thing got rained out. We had some bad weather in Michigan, so they forced a doubleheader the next day, a day-night doubleheader, as you guys recall, on Saturday. And I had some prior commitments with my family, so there was no way I could go back down there on Saturday morning. So, I mean, I felt a little buzz on Friday night, but not quite the buzz that obviously was there the next day when they had 37,000 people, fans, to watch him. I happened to have a bite to eat with a reporter from Venezuela, from Miguel's hometown, and so that was interesting. Young man was there covering it, and he was excited. I mean, he was smiling from ear to ear, guys, and he was so pumped. And he had been in Detroit for several days, of course, not knowing when Miguel was going to get the 3,000th hit. But Detroit loved it. It was a love fest, and so deserving of it. And you know, guys, that this doesn't happen very often, as you know.
There's actually a guy down here. I don't know if this is a name, but Daniel Alvarez, who covers the Marlins. And he said that I saw him actually a couple of days ago at the Marlins Diamondbacks. Said he plans to go up there in June. I don't know if he was a one, but Dan and I are good friends. But yeah, you know, the thing about Miguel Cabrera is this, okay? He hasn't won a World Series in Detroit, but they took him to two World Series games. And we know how iconic he is. We know his number is going to get retired. So, Madman, talk about Miguel Cabrera. You know, he's a generational type of guy. And in that Tigers trade with the Marlins, he's the only player that's still active from a trade that saw Andrew Miller and Cameron Maybin and a bunch of other guys change uniforms.
Well, I think there's three people, Henry Aaron and Willie Mays, along with Miggy there, that lifetime batting average over 300, 500 home runs, 3,000 hits. But then what separates him from those guys, too, if you want to take it, is he's the only guy that's won the Triple Crown with all those accomplishments. Right. So that's amazing in itself. And I'm not saying playing in obscure cities, but, you know, being from Pittsburgh and, you know, we're talking Detroit here and everything, small market type of clubs, but can you imagine him in a big city like LA, New York, or Chicago? He'd be running for mayor.
You should wonder, well, you know, when you look at the hit situation, we know that he stands at 3,008. Next up on that list is Rafael Palmeiro / asterisk, okay, 3,020. And if you want to go a little further, you got Alex Rodriguez at 3,115. How do you spell asterisk? I don't know, but I know what the symbol looks like. But those are the two guys that are in front of Cabrera now. Whether he gets to Rodriguez or not, I don't know, but I know he'll get past Rafael Palmeiro, and we know he's headed to the Hall of Fame when the time comes. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, here's the problem, and I know the Mastericks are going up on some of these guys in the steroid era and everything, but I want to lay something out, guys. I grew up in that era too, and got to cover these guys. And Barry Bonds, the all-time home run leader, and you know, you look at Roger Clemens with what he's done, and the Cy Youngs and all that, and some of these guys. I mean, baseball to me was dead in '94, and Bud Selig threw all these guys under the bus. And if it wasn't these guys trying to save the sport, that's why the strike came back pretty quick this time around, because I don't know what was going to save it if this thing extended. But let's get back to Bud Selig here. He was the guy driving the bus and trying to resurrect the sport. He had a front row seat when McGuire and Sosa were chasing Chick Stig the long ball. So, you know, and to throw these guys all under the bus and have asterisks and everything, I think it's a little unfair to these guys. What you say?
I do too. Yeah, I do too.
Well, yes and no. Here's my problem with Palmeiro. Okay, yes, it is because of the numbers, but the way you conducted yourself in front of Congress, pointing your finger, I've got a problem with the aesthetic appearance of how you legitimately denied it. You look bad doing it. Own it, okay? It's no big deal. Alex Rodriguez, we all know that he has a lot of different personalities, where he has the old nice side where he can dazzle you with his personality. But, you know, I understand that at that time, you know, the strike was what it was, that baseball was in trouble. You had Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive game streak. Had that have been compromised, you know, that sport would have never have come back anyways, because that was a streak of all streaks to pass Gehrig you wanted to see. And I'll tell you a little something else out there. Sammy Sosa, I worked with him in 1987 as a director of public relations for the Gastonia Rangers. Why would I bring that up? Well, on that particular team, a team that lost a total of 90 plus games, we had like 10, 12 major leaguers, including coaches, on that team. So I'm sympathetic to a lot of those guys. Sammy, I've always had a soft spot. He to me, he gained more guilt because of the cork bat than he did the other stuff, because at least he was in trouble when the thing exploded and the cork was all over the place, aside from the steroids. So I do have compassion for the steroid era, although I don't think the baseball writers do, because a few of them haven't gotten in, and there's a principle standard that they're not going to let these guys in. But on point, okay, I understand where you're coming, that Bud Selig had to do whatever he had to do to make sure that he kept the sport. And this so-called strike that you're talking about this year, forget it. I knew they were going to get 162 games. All it was great content for guys like you and me and George to talk about for 99 days. Okay. I loved it. I mean, I didn't have to think about it. We had a chance to bash it until you guys woke up. And by the way, there's 162 games to be played. So this so-called strike, lockout, whatever the heck you want to call it, it don't make a lick of difference, madman. It doesn't.
Well, and not only that, the Expos were denied of winning the division, snapping the Braves' 14-game hold on that division.
Well, true, and it ruined baseball in Montreal. I mean, Ernie Harwell, my mentor, and I know, and George, you can tell you how close that George and I were to Ernie Harwell. Wow. We all know that it wrecked. Hey, Mark, you got to understand, you're dealing with some big company here. I don't know how many different shows you're on, and I'm sure every one of them is good, but you're not dealing with anything with the stature like you have there. Ernie Harwell and I and George were as close as you could get. We were. But even Ernie Harwell and I talked that Montreal got wrecked here because of the strike. We all know the 94 strike was so bad that it took years to recover. This so-called little lockout that everybody was talking about that. Okay, wake me up with a cup of coffee, and then let me know when you're ready to start, and then we'll go from there.
So you're telling me you're as old as Reggie Jackson hitting that roof in the All-Star game?
I saw it. I went at the game.
He hit the light tower, and I got to tell you a quick story on that one, Madman and Scott. Dodge was a big sponsor of Major League Baseball at the time. NBC had the baseball rights. Dodge dealers were sponsoring a contest. Could you name the MVP of the All-Star game in Detroit in 1971? So young George Eichorn filled out a form, and he picked Reggie Jackson. I kid you not. I submitted it. Within a week, I got my prize in the mail. No, it was not money, but it was cool. It was a box that included a softball bat, horseshoes. I mean, a sporty kind of stuff, leisure sports. And a true story. Reggie Jackson, that's the man, because he got George's free gift from the Dodge dealers. But yeah, that was a great game and a great memory of Tiger Stadium. And Scott and I saw so much at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, we did.
We saw a football player die, Chuck Hughes, on the field. Scott and I both.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of you folks that are watching and listening, by the way, George Eichorn and I were at Tiger Stadium on that autumn day when Chuck Hughes collapsed on the field, and Dick Butkus was waving people over. And George, you know what? I don't know how you felt. I was only 8 years old at the time, but I had nightmares that night with my dad at home. It was the most unbelievable thing, experiencing death at such a young age.
Yeah. Oh, I did too. Unbelievable.
It was unreal. Yeah, I mean, Mark, I'm not bragging about this thing. I don't think you want to brag about a man who dies right in front of you when you're young like we were. But Tiger Stadium is what it is. The Lions and the Tigers shared the facility, what they did. And you had multi-purpose stadiums at the time. So, I obviously that situation being what it is, when we talk about Fire Up Michigan, there's a lot to really untangle here. But yeah, I even have a little thing of Reggie Jackson, not a real, when he got inducted into Cooperstown that I bought over at Cooperstown that I hang in my wall. Anything like what you have, but I certainly connect Reggie to that 1971 All-Star game that produced a zillion Hall of Famers. But so really, in closing with the Miguel Cabrera, madman, give me some closing thoughts about Miguel Cabrera, what he means to you in this lifetime.
Well, I think what he means is, he set the bar. Nobody's going to hit that. I mean, you can break this thing down. It just goes to show you, when I look at the decades of baseball, I think the 70s were the best I ever saw in baseball. You had some great hitting clubs and everything. And then what you saw in the 80s with the Tigers running away with the 35-5 start and disposing of the Padres in the World Series. I think the 90s brought something, but boy, I'll tell you, you talk about hitters. My idol, Willie Stargell, still holds the record at Dodger Stadium, putting 2 balls completely into the parking lot there. I was blessed enough a few years back to see Mike Piazza put one in left field. But, I mean, when you look at these hitters back then and you witness Reggie Jackson, you're not going to have guys like those guys, the Stargells, the Parkers, and Jacksons hit home runs like this. These guys would have to use aluminum bats.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've had certainly a lot of players too at Tiger Stadium clearing the roof. You already mentioned Reggie Jackson and guys like Frank Howard and Harmon Killebrew and Cecil Fielder and Scott. How can we forget our great friend Norm Cash?
Right.
We had some bangers in Detroit, and I'm glad you mentioned that because those are historic home runs, and those are guys that didn't mess around with steroids. And I got to compliment Cabrera, as you alluded to earlier. During that time frame when all these guys were trying it, Miguel, as far as we know, kept clean and just did his job and did it great. And I agree with you, Madman and Scott. I don't know if we are going to see another guy like this in our lifetime. I doubt it.
The one thing that people tend to lose sight of is the fact that Comerica Park, they had to move the fences in, and it was a pitcher's park too. So when you talk about the Comerica Park being so intimidating, Juan Gonzalez turned down a lot of money to stay here when Mike Gillich brought him over. But Miguel Cabrera didn't care. That ball's going to the alley, take his doubles and triples. When you think of how many doubles he's amassed, he could probably thank Comerica Park because he's got so many doubles because you couldn't hit him out of the yard.
Exactly.
Anyway.
I'm sure he'd be over 600 home runs by now. Of course.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Yeah. But you're talking about a pitcher's park like Comerica. In fact, I heard a story the other day that the Baltimore Orioles moved their fences back to make it a more pitcher's friendly ballpark. And we're not going to get into that a lot, but we're just talking about the dramatic changes that you've had between Comerica Park when it was there in terms of what it's become and all the different numbers that Miguel Cabrera obviously is connected with. So, there's no question to me, Miguel Cabrera to me is revered not only internationally and as well as Miami, Florida, where I happen to be now, but Metro Detroit. So he's impacted a lot of areas, a lot of people, a lot of communities. And we know he's headed to the Hall of Fame. The only thing I can say about Miggy is he should have gotten his stats a little bit sooner because then when you sign those bigger contracts, they're usually not great on the back end of them. But I'm glad the Tigers were able to get those milestones nonetheless anyways. And they're in their pocket, and he gets the $503,000 wearing the Old English D. So that's what I've got. So a week ago, the NFL draft took place. A guy by the name of Aiden Hutchinson, who, by the way, the Michigan block, stays in Metro Detroit. Now, let's go ahead to set the table on this one a little bit because I think the Lions were fortunate that he fell number 2 and that Jacksonville stayed in the Southeastern Conference to draft Trayvon Walker. Now, I will say this, Chris Spielman should never have left the Lions. He should have always played for the Lions and no place else, even though he played with the Buffalo Bills. We all know that Dan Campbell, I believe, is the right coach because you love his passion and energy. The kneecaps, and I don't care about that. The fact that they're on Hard Knocks and the story. But when you also look at the fact that Brad Holmes is a very shrewd general manager. So I think the Lions were very lucky because when I saw the Jacksonville Jaguars defeat the Colts, I thought, oh, great. And the Lions beat the Packers, which, by the way, gets me bragging rights at home, because my other half is a Packer girl, and I got married on the day that they played. Won't get into that story. I thought for sure the Lions botched an opportunity to get Aiden Hutchinson. I really do. But the fact that as that week went on, that the bettors were getting involved and made me believe the bettors that Trayvon Walker, the Southeastern Conference product from Georgia, and by the way, folks, for whatever it's worth, Georgia had like 15 players selected in the draft. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you beat the Michigan Wolverines with 15 NFL players and a lot of defenders. So it kind of worked out well for both things. At least I want to believe that Aiden Hutchinson, to me, has an opportunity to establish an identity that even Ndamukong Suh had when the Lions picked him with the number 2 pick. So there's a lot of synergy with the number 2 picks, and that's where I'm going to set it. So Aiden Hutchinson, number 2, and Ndamukong Suh, number 2. The nastiness, the identity, Dan Campbell. Man, you couldn't have played it any better than that, right, George?
I agree, Scott. The Lions, it just fell into their lap, and hometown boy made good. He went to grade school at Catholic grade school, not far from Allen Park, where the Lions headquarters is. Dearborn Divine Child, and he, of course, as everybody knows, went to University of Michigan and excelled there. He had the injury, came back from the injury, had a terrific year last year, of course, and they beat Ohio State. Went to the bowl championship series and lost. But the thing is that the man, like you said, has passion. He has passion for the game, just like Campbell, the coach, just like a lot of the players on the team seem to have that. And that's a good sign for the Lions. There's a lot of pressure. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, you're coming from the Detroit area, you're coming from U of M, and you're playing for the home team. I mean, but these fans, they'll just eat it up. They love to see the effort. We know the Lions fans are some of the most loyal fans in all the NFL, as you two know, going on these terrible one playoff win since 1957 when they won the championship in the old NFL days. But the point of it is that they got a good guy. They got their man. You're right. I agree with you totally, Scott.
Yeah, Dan Campbell. I know there was talk about, was it Robert Salah? They wanted to bring him in, the Dearborn guy. And, he subsequently landed with the Jets. But, yeah, I like Dan Campbell. I like the fact that he played. He's got passion. When they were 0-10, they ended up getting that tie with the Steelers. And then, of course, they subsequently won 3 games after that. The team never quit. They lost a lot of close games. So, I think the record's a little bit deceiving there. But, again, they won 3 games, and they still ended up getting a pick that I'm glad that they ended up landing with Aiden Hutchinson. Before I divert to Madman George, when Hutchinson was picked by the Lions, what was the reaction in the entire Metro Detroit community as well, Southeastern Michigan and Metro Detroit?
Well, it was tremendous. I'm glad you asked. The scene of him with his family hugging each other, his father even kissed him. That was so emotional. I mean, he's such a family man. He's got 2. It's just a beautiful family, as you know. His daughters and his wife, mother, and his dad, Chris, are just very close to each other. And it was emotional. The crowd that was on hand at Ford Field was tremendously happy. They reacted positively. The media in Detroit, I think, was probably very pro Lions as far as the move was, the drafting of him. Overall, yeah, I think everybody was very pleased as far as the Motor City goes.
Okay, Mark, Madman.
Well, I don't want to blow out the balloons on this thing, but when I look at it, Dan Campbell to me is more suited to my other job before I got into radio. He reminds me of a guy I met in the Wrestling Federation when I was the ring announcer. More suited. He's going to, everybody has their way of doing things. We've seen the Wayne Fonces. We've seen a lot of Lion coaches come through there. We've seen a lot of GMs come through there, and Matt Millen. I get giddy, and I always say to myself, God, I know the tradition on Thanksgiving is I get to see the Lions 9:30 a.m. out here on the West Coast. But let's be in the thick of things here. Let's have something to play for. And I feel bad for that Detroit faithful there because this team hasn't done nothing for a lot of years. And the one word that comes to mind, guys, for me is I need to see progress. Progress every year. Are you working towards something getting better or are you regressing? And to me, in a 4-team division now without Tampa there anymore, this team can't seem to get past Chicago, Green Bay, and Minnesota. And that's a concern to me. And, when you look at it from afar, Jared Goff, I was never a big Jared Goff guy when the Rams picked him up. They ship him to Detroit. Maybe he was out of the spotlight and everything. But, guys, realistically, there's a tough schedule coming up for 2022 with these guys. Are they going to realistically get over the 500 mark and do something?
Good question. No, we don't know that. That's the great unknown. I mean, I can't argue with you, man. I mean, they have to show some progress. And that's been the problem, and they're changing coaches a lot. Let's be honest here. They had a good one, and Scott and I have talked about this many times. Jim Caldwell. Yeah. And the way Jim Caldwell was treated and shown the back door because you didn't win, even though you made the playoffs. You weren't winning enough. Yeah. And then of course they changed the whole regime over again, and we all know about what happened with Quinn and Patricia, and that was an ugly scene. So no, you're absolutely right. I mean, they got to start getting over the hump. They got to start showing progress. They got to start beating. And I'm not talking about the season series, but like you said, move up in the standings and get ahead of Chicago, get ahead of Minnesota, eventually Green Bay or whoever.
Well, I'll never forget earlier this season when the Pistons were taking on the Houston Rockets. It was actually a nationally televised game, and Jeff Van Gundy was on there. And Jeff made one simple statement where he was so much on target. What are the Detroit Lions' problems? He said, don't get rid of good players. That's it. Don't get rid of good players. That's all. Boy, it seems simple, doesn't it? Now, I should also point out, and that's this. Okay, when the Lions head coaches leave, they don't get other head coaching opportunities. They don't.
Right.
They don't. So when you leave Detroit and you're given 3 to 5 years to build your program, you don't win there, you're not getting hired again. I thought the best chance they had with it was Jim Caldwell or Jim Schwartz. And I think Jim Schwartz really was a pretty decent coach. He was just dealt a very bad hand is what he did. And the timing was there. But I've always liked Jim Schwartz, and I was really hoping he would. But Jeff Van Gundy said, don't get rid of good players. I've always thought that Eric Kramer should have been the starter after they won that playoff game. Wayne Fonse's philosophy was, I don't believe a quarterback should lose their job due to an injury. Don't tell that to Bill Belichick. And how did it work with Tom Brady? Okay. Or any of the other guys that had a different opinion. No, if a guy's working well, injury or no injury, okay, he's your starter, and that's that. But we haven't quite figured that out back home in Detroit, okay? And I'm not afraid to come on here one day wearing a Lions cap, because if it weren't for the Detroit Lions and their exceptional PR department, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to cover 4 Super Bowls, and George wouldn't have had the opportunity to cover a couple. So, I've had a good working relationship with them. My heart's always been with the Lions. And, you would think that a good Lions team in any other market could easily sell out. And listen, South Florida, where I live right now, it's a tough ticket there where you don't know what the crowds are. I put a 500 Lions club any other place in the South, and they'd probably sell out the joint, because the Detroit fans are some of the best in the country. They deserve a lot more. And I'll even go a step further with the Lions, and that's this. I remember covering a Arizona Cardinals game against the Dallas Cowboys over at Sun Devil Stadium. And I know the Hunts wanted the Lions to lose the Thanksgiving game because they didn't feel they deserved it because they weren't relevant. So I walk up to Jerry Jones in the Dallas Cowboy locker room and said, what do you think, Jerry? Jerry's very approachable, by the way. Do you think the Lions should lose the Thanksgiving game? He looks at me and said, let me tell you something, Scott. As long as I'm in this league, they aren't losing that Thanksgiving game, and neither are we. We wanted it when nobody wanted it. We're going to get it. How did it work out? They got the prime game, and they could go ahead and rotate it. So Jerry Jones was making sure the Lions weren't losing that early game, even though they're good hosts, because everybody's beating them these days on that day, but it doesn't make a lick of difference. And, since I have a Pittsburgh guy on the other end of this thing like you are, I was at that game when they had the botched coin toss. So the Lions do tend to lead the rule changes where you had 2 officials there, and the Steelers lost that game. And, of course, if you want to talk about the Lions leading more rule change, what about the catch rule when Calvin Johnson was part? So we do make a big difference in football, maybe for all the right or wrong reasons, but it doesn't make any difference.
Well, and Jerry Jones, you brought up an interesting thing there. He was instrumental in getting football back in Los Angeles after a couple decades. And you know what? If they let Jerry Jones run the league and moved Roger Goodell out, I think the NFL would even be better than it is today.
Interesting point. So, all right, so let's put a ribbon on the Aiden Hutchinson thing, okay, George?
Okay. Yeah,
and
well, and again, I think that he's a good guy. He's not as built as big as some guys, What's he, 280? But he's 6'6", I think, and there's room to grow still. I mean, he's got a lot of growing up still, I think, as far as bulking up a little bit. I do want to tell you a little trivia thing. I gave you one earlier about my Reggie Jackson story. I'll give you one on Hutchinson. So every year, the Catholic High School League, which is the league that Aiden played in at Dearborn Divine Child, plays at Ford Field. They used to play at the Silverdome, their championship game. And so I was asked to be the public address announcer. Wow. So I was the public address announcer at Ford Field for the last time Aiden Hutchinson played a game inside the home of the Detroit Lions. Just a little trivia for you.
That's pretty
His
neat.
Dearborn Divine Child team won. And my brother, Marty, was the spotter for me. And he reminded me, he says, George, do you remember all the times I had to say, tackle by Hutchinson, tackle by Hutchinson, tackle by Hutchinson? I mean, I'm not kidding you guys. I mean, he was all over the field. And that's right. And again, I'm talking high school. He did it at Michigan. But I'm pulling for the guy, obviously. I don't mean to sound like a homer, and I'm not. I'm just a little way
That's
for me
nice
for me to
story,
connect
man.
with the taking of Hutchinson.
Great
Well,
story. And, he grew up a New England Patriots fan, too.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I liked about the old USFL, and I covered that league too. I went to a USFL championship game. Is they used to have the territorial draft, and the Michigan Panthers drew from the Spartans, and the Wolverines. God, can you only imagine how many at the NFL had a territorial draft? That the Lions would be a whole lot better if you were drawing from
You
at least.
you had to bring that up after you destroyed my Pittsburgh Maulers, and now we're 0-3.
Yeah, well, you know what? How many times have you needled me about my Lions? You're lucky I waited later in the broadcast to do it instead of, and then you didn't mind doing it off air about telling us about the Pirates and the Tigers. So, yeah,
Hey,
I was
let
looking.
me tell you one thing, if I can share it real quick. I mean,
Sure.
when the Steelers, we get rid of somebody, it doesn't really come back to haunt us. And let me tell you, this Kenny Pickett, there's only been 3 quarterbacks in Pittsburgh, that I can see that are actually good, because Neil O'Donnell played for the Cowboys in the Super Bowl. But Terry Bradshaw, Ben Roethlisberger, Kenny Pickett, man, I love this kid, man. He's going to be something. And Pittsburgh knows how to draft, kind of like Mac Jones falling into New England's lap. This kid's going to be a decade quarterback in the Berg.
Well, all I can tell you is I think that Pittsburgh regretted when they didn't draft Dan Marino. How'd that turn out? And they weren't going to let that whole hometown thing bite them in the butt many, many years later. So, yeah, no, I had to bring up the old USFL territorial draft. And the only reason why it's synonymous is because we talk about the fact that Michigan does produce an awful lot of players. They even had a fair amount of players drafted. But, I'm glad that they got Aiden Hutchinson. I really am. I think geographically for both franchises, the Jaguars, you got the Southeastern Conference kid and you got the kid that played in the Midwest. And the main thing that I think that Hutchinson can do on the defensive side is identity. The Lions need nastiness and identity. I don't care how many cheap shots Ndamukong Suh used to take with everybody and how many times he had to go to the principal's office for every fine he got landed. The Lions need nastiness and identity. And I believe that as long as Aiden Hutchinson stays away from any significant injury, they may have accomplished that. But it worked out well. The football gods were all right. Trayvon Walker's in the Southeast. Aiden Hutchinson is in the Midwest. So any other closing thoughts? I have one more team I want to get to, but I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity.
Well, not only that, the NFC should thank their lucky stars. It's kind of looking like the Big Sky, because if Detroit was in that AFC, man, that thing is looking like the SEC. You're going to have 10, 11 teams over there knocking each other out to get to the Super Bowl. I can't seem to come up with 5. And I love my Washington team that I grew up with on the NFC side of things, but I can't figure out 5 teams on the NFC side that can represent. I keep stopping at 3.
Yeah, that's a good point. The AFC is loaded. No question about it, man. They are loaded. And I agree with you. And I want to go back just quickly, guys, to that one point about stars leaving. It is very important. And I'm glad, Scott, you touched on it. Madman, you touched on it. The list is a mile long. Okay, yep. Matthew Stafford, that took the cake right there. And you mentioned Sue and Calvin Johnson for whatever reason. I know there were injuries, Billy, and go down the list. Barry Sanders left. Okay, and I don't care what the circumstances were. Detroit has not got a good record, like you said, with retaining their stars. And whether it's walking away from the game, whether it's trading them away, whether them walking into the GM's office and says, I want out of here, that crap's got to stop. If Detroit wants to be a winner in the NFL, it does. And I'm glad you guys brought that up today.
You guys have had running backs and wide receivers, and that should get you over the hump. But you're right, losing coaches and changing coaches. It kind of reminds me of the Cleveland Browns. Every year they keep dropping a coach. You got to have some stability. And I think the 5 things we've talked about before and other things, you got to have accountability, communication, preparation. And there's some teams across the league that are lacking this year in and year out. I got to get back to where John Elway and Dan Marino carried a clipboard for a year. You're taking these, guys and throwing them in systems 3 games, and they don't do their job, and then you're getting drafted a quarterback the next year. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's what you have. Well, the main thing is, I'll go back to what I said. Jeff Van Gundy said, don't get rid of good players. Folks, just so you know, this episode here of Fire Up Michigan is being heard on Spreaker, and it's also being seen on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So in case you want to hear it again, go to Spreaker.com, look for Fire Up Michigan. You'll find it there, and you'll also find it on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So you can go ahead and subscribe at no charge. Last thing I want to get to, and we're only going to touch on it a little bit tonight, is the coaching change that took place last weekend, where Jeff Blashill was fired by Steve Eiserman. Right now, obviously, Jeff Blashill's record will go down as a little bit deceiving because he came in on the wrong end of the rebuild. But the one, and I know where it's too early to come up with candidates, so I'm only going to say one guy out there, but I know this is a story we're going to talk about probably in the next episode or two, so I just want to kind of throw it out there early on. If it were me, I would love to see Joel Quenneville be the next coach of the Red Wings. Here's a guy that was formerly with the Windsor Spitfires, and to me, that would be the ideal fit. Now, I know he hasn't approached the NHL about returning yet. I know he's trying to let things cool down a little bit because of the previous situation he had, the abuse situation with the Blackhawks. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but should he come out of retirement, I think Joel Quenneville would be a great candidate. I know that the preliminary candidates haven't been identified yet. So that's just a personal choice. Don't take it for any more than just a personal choice. That Joel Quenneville lands back in the NHL. I think it should be with the Red Wings. With that said, we're going to devote more time in the future. George, some thoughts about the Jeff Blashill situation?
Well, I think it was just inevitable. It was going to happen. The team regressed the second half this season. They were hit by some injuries, but they regressed terribly on defense. And a lot of it has to lack of depth. They didn't have depth out there. So, he made the playoffs the first year, then he didn't make it for all the years since. Detroit can't take that any longer. Okay. They got that streak of 25, 26 years in a row. And then now they've gone 6 in a row without making the playoffs.
Right.
And Jeff's a good guy. And it was one of those like bittersweet things. Hearing from Captain Dylan Larkin and some of the other players, they liked Jeff. Jeff cared for them, and he might have been not the best motivator, but X's and O's he was strong. But again, let's talk about that more later. I think it was a move Stevie Y had to make, and Quenneville that would be at the top of my list. Another name to keep in mind is a guy named Lane Lambert, right. One of Steve Eiserman's teammates. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Sergei Fedorov is a coach, but that's in Russia. I doubt if they're going to be able to get him back here. There's been some talk about eventually retiring his number, and that hasn't even happened yet. The Illiches have such a, I don't know why, they don't like the way Sergei went out to another team. I'm just saying that it's interesting, though, that he's a successful coach in Russia.
Well, so tell me, George, what was the reaction when Jeff Blashill finally did get fired last Saturday for the entire community?
Well, I know several Red Wing fans that are friends of mine, and they were very happy. They've been calling for it for a while. The beat writers, I'm not so sure. I think, Helene St. James and Ted Colfin, as you know, Scotty, have been with the team a long time.
Right.
They saw it coming too. I think most of the fans, most of the media weren't surprised at all, but, Steve is so low key. Kenny Holland was so accessible with the media, with the press, if you will. And Stevie is not accessible at all. He keeps a very low profile. He does it his way, but he surrounds himself with, smart people. But, I think it was a move that had to be made. And I think Stevie Y finally realized it too. Now, whether Chris Illich had anything to do with it, we don't know. There was nothing said about that at all, whether the ownership team, Marion is getting quite up there now. Mrs. Illich is like 89. I don't think she has much day-to-day contact with the Red Wings like she used to. So Chris Illich runs both the Red Wings and the Tigers, as you guys know, their son. It was time to do it. I think most people in Detroit were, I don't want to say pleased. You don't like to see a guy get fired, but they needed to make a change. They needed fresh air.
Could there be a Mike Babcock sighting in Detroit?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think he'd be the right guy to come back here. He got the one cup, but they started, I think, tuning out to him too, before he landed the big job in Toronto. I don't see Babcock in the picture. That'd be a shock to me.
All right, man from a distance out in California. What are your thoughts about the Red
Well, I'm
Wings
going to throw,
situation?
three things at you guys, and my choices would be in the first guy. I mean, first of all, the Red Wings are in it. It's kind of like we were talking about with football, the SEC, and you got the Big Sky Conference. The East is deadly, man. Look at this thing was showed up, a month ago with the teams: Pittsburgh's, the Washingtons, the Floridas, the Torontos, Boston's. I mean, the Carolinas. The list goes on and on. What you need to do in Detroit now to get back to respectability, like you said, George, 6 years out of the running, 25 years straight of playoffs. You got to get this team back to respectability. You need to bring in a high-profile coach. Get a Barry Melrose in there. Bring in Wayne Gretzky. He had a Mickey Mouse operation in Arizona. Bring a high-profile guy. And the other thing is try to pry Barry Trotz away from the Islanders. There's a guy that builds teams. I mean, if that's where you're going to go with it, but these middle-of-the-pack coaches, if you're going to try to compete with some of these teams in the East that are single-handedly far and above the rest of the competition, I'm not seeing Detroit's, on the other side of this thing, but you need a high-profile coach to get you and run with it. It happened out here in Los Angeles with Barry Melrose. He came out here, turned the team, got them to the Stanley Cup. You need these kind of guys. So my choices are Melrose, Gretzky, or pry Barry Trotz away from the Islanders.
That's an interesting point. Number one, Barry Melrose used to be a coach, I believe, with the Adirondack Red Wings before he ended up leaving.
Yes, Scott. Yeah.
That was number one. Number two, Wayne Gretzky's not going to coach. I realized that situation in Arizona was bad. I could get into an entire show about how bad that situation is in Arizona, but you don't have that much time, Mark, so I won't. But of the three that you're talking about, Barry Trotz, I think, would make the most sense, only because the Red Wings faced him plenty when he was with the Nashville Predators. So of the three, I think that Barry Trotz would be there. But we're going to talk about this at a later date. Folks, this is Fire Up Michigan. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Please be joined by George Eichorn, a long time, 4.2 decade co-host, and Man Mancini, the new man to the group here. But we're looking forward to building something very special, not only in the Metro Detroit area, but I want to preface in the Mitten State throughout the state of Michigan. So I want to make sure that everybody realizes it's not limited to Metro Detroit. Our goal is to make sure that we cover the entire state and blanket it. And we are so happy that we have an opportunity to launch this tonight and hope that you have an opportunity to enjoy this program. There's a lot of experience. I know we've covered a lot. We've done a lot of name dropping. It goes back decades, whether it's Gordie Howe, Chuck Hughes, Steve Eisman, Barry Sanders. We've been all over the mitten with the names, but get used to it, folks. We're going to be dropping an awful lot of names indefinitely for as long as we're all alive to enjoy the opportunity. There might be shows here where we'll bring on a fourth person from the Michigan. So these are things that we encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. And also, we'll keep you posted about where this show can be heard audio tonight, Spreaker.com. But obviously, we look forward to having a lot of changes. Well, Mark, since you're the new man on the totem pole here with George and I, we know that you have an extensive background. Man Mancini got triple. We have a three of a kind, MMM. Man Mancini. Of course, Motor City Madmouth has a lot of M's there. If you look at my last name, we got M's. And of course, GE, George Eichorn. GE, it brings good thing to life. Sorry, folks.
Good.
I know we're getting copyrighted by that, but who cares? It is a GE, George Eichorn, General Electric, whatever. But all right, Mark, I said a mouthful. Then again, I always do anyways.
Well, I'm blessed enough to be a part of this great show, Sweeping Motown. And George has got a lot of insight. You do too. And man, I'm blessed to be the third wheel here. And boy, it's going to be great to let the great people of Detroit know what we're all about. And, we can be critical at times, speaking the truth, and we can be a homer at times. And that's the great thing about it.
So with that said, Mark, I know you have a lot going on. So while we have a few minutes to go, we'll let you go through the grocery list of things that I want everybody to know as much as I can about Man Mancini and how many different things that you're involved in. Because when you and I started this working relationship, we talked a lot before we have our dream to do something together. But let everybody know a lot about Mark Mancini. We're going to do a future broadcast on the road, talk about Mancini sports, but not tonight. Tonight's more of an orientation.
XM Sirius Sports with Fred Wallen and Artie Source, blessed enough to do that one. Philadelphia's WWDB, Liberty Bell Smack, Marianne Costello and Sal Tartaglia and myself. And then, part of this great thing, and Peter Blake out in Tampa. We got Cornelius in Arizona. I'm blessed enough to do for the second year in a row the Pittsburgh Pirate podcast with first base coach Tarek Brock. I mean, I just can't say enough. You surround yourself with good people, good things happen. And boy, with your wealth and knowledge and George's across this board, man, I'm going to absorb a lot of things like a sponge.
Well, let me tell you what, I've been fortunate, George, to appear on the Philadelphia show. I recently had an operation, and I ended up, because of Mark, went in on the air in Philadelphia the day after my operation. And now I appear in Oakland every Saturday with Bruce Kessinger. We have a lot of things there. And I know Mark is working on getting more appearances on Mancini Sports. We're just not even beginning to hit the tip of the iceberg. Ralph Williams, Lou Landers has come out of all this. And we're just getting started. And when Mark and I got together, I thought if there's ever a guy for me to work with, Madman Mancini, Motor City Madmouth, all these M's are wild. I couldn't have picked a better person to line up with as well. And George, well, what can I say to you? Not only you're a great colleague, but you're a brother to me. And our history is so deep that what can I tell you? So, and now that all three of us are on this venture together, I expect us to, pardon the expression, we are going to hit a grand slam home run with this one. And I'm glad that we were able to work it out tonight. But folks, please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. All right, Mark, with that said, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at Mancini Sports at yahoo.com. Also, Mark Mancini on Facebook, Twitter, Mancini at Mancini Sports. I mean, Instagram, wherever you want. I mean, I'm blessed to be a part of all these great things. And man, oh man, I feel like Willie Hernandez in the bullpen. Somebody's got to be Sparky Anderson here. Somebody's going to be Dave Rozema. Let's relive the 84 Tigers.
Well, let's live the 1968 Tigers too. Mickey Lode's one of my favorite idols, but you don't have that much time to get into that one. George, obviously, I want you to go out there. And I know you work with the South Florida Tribune and the Detroit Monitor, but the biggest thing I want you to do is promote the book that we're both fortunate to be a part of.
Thank you, Scott. Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the air from Arcadia Printing. Scott knows that I put this book together with a passion and a love for sports broadcasting, and like you said, the whole state of Michigan. We've got pictures and stories in there from the guys like Bob Ufer and Jim Brandstatter and George Blaha and Bud Lynch and Ernie Harwell, and you just go down the list. And Scott, you're in there too. You got Jimmy Connors with you in one picture. I know Muhammad Ali is with you, Scott, in another picture in my book. And folks, you can get that book for $19.99 right on the South Florida Tribune website. And it's a great book, and I hope you all can enjoy that, especially folks that are watching us from the state of Michigan, but anywhere in the country that we'll ship it to you. So glad to be part of the show. Good to see you and meet you, Madman and Scott. We go back such a long way. We got a great future ahead of us with this show. Definitely.
Oh, I'm so proud of it. Sorry,
I'm happy. I need to get your signature. Can you guys sign my Sidney Crosby jersey?
Sure, why not? I'll be more than happy to sign anything. I can't wait to get to LA. So let me give you some information about us, okay? You can go to www.southfloridatribune.com. Locate us on Twitter at Tribune South. Email us southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. All it takes is a click and a subscribe, and you get to look at us, listen to us. And, of course, for tonight, Spreaker.com has this particular episode of Fire Up Florida, and there'll be a lot of other things as well. So you can email us. You can follow us on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me all over the place. But meanwhile, great first act, Fire Up Michigan, presented by the South Florida Tribune and Mancini Sports, and George Eichorn, myself, and Madman Mancini, fortunate enough to bring it to tonight. So on behalf of George Eichorn and Man Mancini, this is Scott Morgan, Route the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this inaugural edition of Fire Up Michigan, and we look forward to doing it better the next time. Good night, everybody, and go out there and listen to the show. There's a lot of history and a lot of nostalgia, and the best part about it is we just getting started. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend.